This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitsahone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. Today, we're looking at a particular category of spells, often called pitch spells. These are spells that come with an alternating casting cost that involves exiling a card or cards from your hand, or in other words, pitching them, in exchange for the spell being free. As we all know, spells being free is very powerful, even if you are 2-for-1ing yourself, provided the spell does something powerful enough. As we will see, some of the best pitch spells have the ability to avoid that 2-for-1 altogether. I was inspired to make this list because it looks like Allosaurus Rider is primed to make some noise in Modern, where it is appearing in combo decks with Neoform. While it is 0 points right now, I'm pretty sure it will be getting them soon, so I thought it would be a good idea to see what pitch cards have done in the past. In all, 26 of these have been printed in Magic, and we're going to talk about the 10 that have had the biggest impact on competitive Magic. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. Pro Tour and Mythic Championship top 8s, as well as Vintage and Legacy Championship top 8s are worth 2 points, and Grand Prix top 8s are worth 1 point. Now, let's look at number 10, where we have Sickening Shoal, part of a cycle of pitch spells and Betrayers of Kamigawa. This cycle is a bit different than the rest. For one thing, the Shoals carry the Kamigawa block exclusive subtype of Arcane, which has some synergies with various cards in the block. Second, this is the only cycle of pitch cards where the converted mana cost of the card you exile to cast it for free actually matters, as it plays a role in the effect of the card. One thing that's nice about Sickening Shoal 2 is that it is easier to get use out of in a pinch than some of the other pitch cards. While paying X black to give something -X isn't a great deal, it isn't abysmal either. And some of the casting costs of the other cards on this list are definitely that. Sickening Shoal only made it to the big time in Kamigawa block, where it was used in control decks as a key removal spell. At number 9 we have Commandeer, which comes from Cold Snap, where we had the most recent cycle of pitch spells. The spells in this cycle, on average at least, are certainly less powerful than those from older cycles. For one thing, they are all incredibly expensive if you have to cast them, and instead of just asking for one card to be exiled, they ask for 2. This means that instead of the 2-for-1 that comes with most pitch spells, these put you in a worse spot with the 3-for-1. Commandeer is the only card from that cycle to make the list, and it manages to overcome those problems by having the most powerful effect of the bunch. While there are several effects that let you steal spells or redirect them, this is one of the more flexible versions of that effect we've ever seen, as it can even gain control of permanents, provided they are non-creatures. Redirecting an opponent's non-creature spell with a single card normally results in a 2-for-1, so instead of getting 3-for-1 in this case, you're usually going to get 3-for-2'd, which isn't nearly as bad. This is because you redirect one of your opponent's removal spells back onto one of their own creatures, effectively eliminating 2 of their cards. If you use this to steal an artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker, you're also basically getting a 3-for-2, since you are taking a permanent away from your opponent and giving it to yourself. The fact that you can do this, even when you're tapped out, is definitely valuable too, because this type of effect can normally be played around, but it is much more difficult to do that against Commandeer. It first saw play in Standard at Worlds in 2006, where it was played in blue-white Tron decks, which were also perfectly capable of hardcasting the card if they had to. It re-emerged in Modern in 2016 as part of the Walks deck, a deck loaded up with extra turn effects that draws a ton of extra cards in its quest to find more Time Walk effects, which also means you load up your hand for Commandeer. This deck is still around in Modern, putting up a top 16 earlier this year, so Commandeer is likely to add to its score in the future. At number 8 we have Pyrokinesis, which comes from the very first cycle of pitch spells, which debuted way back in 1996 in Alliances. Pyrokinesis is the kind of spell that lets you divide damage between multiple targets, which means it is another pitch spell that can overcome the intended downside of 2-for-1ing yourself, provided your opponent has a couple creatures in play that you can kill with just Pyrokinesis. Since you are spending 0 mana to kill 2 things that they likely spent more than 0 mana on, you're coming out ahead. It saw play in Standard shortly after being printed, putting up its first points with a top 8 at Worlds in 1997. In 2002, it had a resurgence in Extended, putting up 2 top 8s at Grand Prix Lisbon in 2002 in a mono-red burn deck. It has also seen play intermittently in Legacy Goblins since 2005, though it doesn't have a top 8 there since 2012. At number 7, we have another card from the Shoal cycle of pitch spells from Betrayers of Kamigawa, and that's Disrupting Shoal, which can be a free counterspell, something you should probably get used to seeing as we get close to the top of this list. Anyhow, Disrupting Shoal can be a bit tricky to use as a pitch spell, since the spell you are countering has to have the exact cost of the card you exile with it, or the same value as X if you're paying mana. Either way, this counterspell does require a bit of work. However, in lots of formats, there tends to be a preponderance of spells at certain mana costs, especially 1, 2, and 3, and that means that frequently, Disrupting Shoal can be free. In Standard, it saw play in blue-black control, putting up a single Pro Tour top 8 there. It has been the most active in Modern, where it was played in 2011 and 2012 in creature-based combo decks like Splinter Twin and Infect. Creature-based combos can be a bit fragile because most people run removal for creatures, and both of these decks sought to win the game in a single turn by targeting one of their creatures with a spell or spells, and Disrupting Shoal provided a potentially free way to keep the opponent from disrupting the combo. Its most recent top 8 in the format came in 2015 in a Temur aggro deck. It also has a single Grand Prix top 8 in Legacy from 2005 in the aggro control Thresh-Grow deck, which ran several free counterspells, including Daze and Force of Will, along with the Shoal. And number 6 is Unmask, which was part of a cycle of pitch spells and Mercadian Masks. Unmask gives you a free coercion effect, which is some pretty powerful disruption for only 0 mana. Sure, there is no way to avoid getting 2-for-1 with this particular pitch spell, but it is worth 2-for-1ing yourself against a lot of decks to completely derail their plans by taking away a key card. In Extended, it saw play in a variety of mono-black decks, both control and aggro, but it has seen the most play in Eternal formats. One of its more popular homes in both formats is Dredge decks that run almost no mana. They just focus on milling themselves and getting a win condition out of their graveyard, and Unmask provides a way to protect that plan that doesn't involve having to run any lands. In addition, it also sees play in Reanimator decks, which can use Unmask to check to see if the coast is clear to try to bring back your big boy from the graveyard. At number 5, we have Reverent Mantra, part of the cycle of pitch spells from Mercadian Masks. Like all good pitch spells, it does something that is especially problematic for an opponent who has decided that since you're tapped out, you're completely defenseless, since it gives protection from a chosen color until end of turn to your whole team. This could be used defensively to blank a removal spell or a damage-dealing board sweeper, and it can also be used offensively, to make it so your board is suddenly unblockable or to allow all your creatures to survive combat while your opponents now die. Reverent Mantra put up all 12 of its points at a single Pro Tour, the Masks Block Pro Tour in 2000. This event had what is one of the most degenerate tournament environments in the history of the game, and was completely dominated by Rebels decks, which were made up of Rebel creatures who all had abilities that allowed them to recruit other Rebels directly to the battlefield, which allowed you to sort of climb up a chain until your board was enormous. Reverent Mantra provided a way for these decks not only to avoid removal spells, but to win in the mirror, something that was important since Rebel decks made up the vast majority of the field, and many games were decided by whoever could cast the Mantra first and swing for lethal with their army of Rebels. At number 4, we have Foil, another free counterspell, which is the only representative from an uncommon cycle of pitch spells and Prophecy. Most of the cards in this cycle only ask you to discard a basic land card that produces mana of the same color as that particular pitch spell. But there was concern about Foil being too powerful, so you also have to discard another card to cast it for free. And that was probably a good call, since unlike Disrupting Shoal, Foil is a straight-up hard counter, the kind that allows you to say no to pretty much anything, even if you're tapped out. And while 4 mana to counter a spell isn't a good deal, that being the fail case here isn't too bad, especially compared to the other pitch spell counterspells out there. It saw success in Standard in 2000 and 2001, seeing play in traditional blue control decks, as well as the more creature-based opposition control decks of the time. In Extended, it saw play in what is one of my own personal favorite decks ever, Super Grow, which was an aggro control deck that aimed to get a Quirion Dryad in play, and then proceed to play a draw-go type game where the Dryad continued to grow massive as spells are countered and creatures are destroyed. It hasn't seen play anywhere since 2005, and I think it is less likely to than a lot of the other cards on this list, just because there are better free counterspells out there, and only so many slots in decks. At number 3 is Contagion, another pitch spell from the cycle that started it all in Alliances. Back in Magic's early days, there wasn't a move towards only having a few kinds of counters around, and that's why Contagion distributes the sort of strange -2/-1 counters, something that seems super weird to us today since Wizards in the last 15 years or so has made an effort to only make +1/+1 and -1/-1 counters, which makes sense because things can get confusing with a bunch of different counters around. Anyway, Contagion could operate as a free removal spell against anything with 2 or less toughness, and if your opponent had 2 small creatures out, it could even take down 2 of them. One of the nice things about counters, though, is you can get value out of it even when you can't kill something. The weakening effect can make it so that your creatures can win combat. It is clear that in set design, Contagion stood above other cards in the cycle like Pyrokinesis, because it also requires you to pay 1 life in addition to exiling a card. Of course, that really isn't that much of a cost, as we know today. From 1996 to 1997, Contagion saw a lot of play in Standard, showing up in Navinrial's disc control decks, as well as the Necropotence decks that dominated the format. Necropotence was an absurdly powerful enchantment that allowed you to draw tons of cards, meaning it was easy in this deck to cast this for free. It then transitioned into Extended, where it was played between 1997 and 2000 in that format's version of Necropotence. After several years of silence, in 2007, Contagion got its lone Legacy Grand Prix Top 8 in a mono-black aggro deck. At number 2, we have Misdirection, our final card from the pitch spell cycle from Mercadian Masks. It is somewhat similar to Commandeer, which we saw earlier. While Commandeer is more flexible, since Misdirection can only redirect spells and only those that have targets, Misdirection only asks you to pitch a single card and only costs 5 in a fail case, which makes it a lot better than Commandeer in most scenarios. It can still redirect removal spells, which is arguably the strongest thing you can do with Commandeer anyway. It had 2 top 8s at the Mercadian Masks Block Pro Tour, appearing in the only non-Rebels decks to top 8 the event. It also saw some play in Standard and mono-blue aggro decks. In Extended, it saw play in blue-based control decks that ran Psychotog, a creature, as the primary win condition, so protecting Psychotog was of crucial importance, and Misdirection could obviously do it for free while also killing an opponent's creature. Eternal formats have been the most frequent home for Misdirection, though, which is usually a really good indicator of how powerful a card is. In both formats, it has been used to protect decks that try to win the game by quickly cheating a creature into play, since keeping that creature around just means you win the game, and Misdirection being able to protect the creature for free is great. In Legacy, it has been most frequently featured in Show and Tell and Reanimator decks. In Vintage, between 2014 and 2015, it saw play in Oath of Druids decks. Both of these decks seek to get Gristlebrand into play really quickly, and then if you can protect him with Misdirection, obviously you're just going to win. And at number 1, surprising no one, is the pitch spell that everyone knows, and that's Force of Will. Part of the same cycle as Contagion and Pyrokinesis, Force of Will is easily the most powerful pitch spell, not only of that cycle, but of any pitch spell. Force of Will and Contagion are the only 2 cards in that cycle that ask you to pay life in addition to pitching another card, but, as we said earlier, that's not much of an additional cost. Force of Will is very functionally similar to Foil, with the key difference between the two being that Force of Will only asks you to discard a single blue card. Foil might cost 1 less mana to hard cast, but that just doesn't matter. As a result of this power, Force of Will has gone on to be arguably the best counterspell in the entire game, and is a staple in both Vintage and Legacy, where it plays a large role in making blue the most played color in both formats. Well, that does it for today's MTG Top 10. Do you think we'll ever see pitch spells again, or would Wizards be silly to do such a thing? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, I'll be back on Friday with another MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to see more MTG Top 10s from the past, you should see the playlist on the screen now. It is jammed full of over 170 of them. Thanks for watching.